The warehouse stood there, silent and imposing, its secrets hidden behind rusted walls and broken windows. The air around it felt thick with untold stories, each one waiting to be uncovered. That made his skin crawl. Although the padlock was rusty, the chain was loose, as if it had been disturbed recently. "I wasn't like this before," he commented, casting an apprehensive look at Henry. He nodded and cautiously stepped forward. Madison lifted the chain and slowly pulled the door. The creak echoed in the silence like a scream, as if that door hadn't been opened in decades. As soon as the passage revealed itself, a strong and unpleasant smell filled the air, making the two hesitate for a moment. Madison brought her hand to her face, trying to block out the odor and ignore the growing uneasiness that seemed to tighten her stomach. Before they could react, the cat entered first. His movements were determined, almost as if he knew exactly where he was going. Henry and Madison exchanged a brief look, and then, without words, decided to follow the animal inside. The mystery only seemed to grow. Henry and Madison followed the cat, illuminating the dark interior with their flashlights. The air there was heavy, and the place had a gloomy appearance with old boxes and the remains of furniture scattered across the floor, covered in dust and cobwebs. The feeling that something was terribly wrong grew with every step they took. Then the silence was broken. A strange sound echoed from the back of the warehouse. Something was moving there. Henry looked at Madison, his heart racing. "Henry, whatever it is, we're about to find out." The tension in the air was almost palpable. If you like exciting stories like this, leave a like and share your opinion in the comments. Your interaction is essential for us to continue bringing you more intriguing stories. And if you have an experience to share, share it. It can inspire many people who, like you, love animals. The noise at the back of the warehouse continued, reverberating off the rusty, weathered walls. Madison instinctively looked at Henry. They both felt the weight of that moment, as if something was about to happen. The flashlights shook slightly in their hands, reflecting the mix of adrenaline and expectation that overwhelmed them. Meanwhile, the cat moved forward, moving with the same determination that had brought him here. "Madison, what do you think this is?" Madison whispered, trying to keep control of her breathing, which was beginning to accelerate. Her senses were on high alert, as if every sound or movement could bring answers or danger. "Henry, I don't know, but we'd better stay alert," replied Henry, keeping his eyes fixed on the dark depths of the warehouse where the sound had come from. The cat stopped abruptly. He turned around, facing the two police officers as if to ensure that they continued to follow him until the end. The moment was tense, and something in the feline's eyes said that what awaited them there would be anything but ordinary. The cat let out another meow, long and full of tension, before moving towards a dark corner of the warehouse. Silence once again dominated the environment, broken only by the sound of Henry and Madison's own footsteps echoing through the empty space. As they approached with each step, they realized that this place was even stranger than they had imagined. There were clear signs that someone or something had been there recently. Broken boxes, marks on the floor, and a nauseating smell in the air. Something rotten and unpleasant that instinctively made them hold their breath. Madison directed the beam of her flashlight towards one of the boxes in the corner. It was partially open, with the lid broken as if it had been turned over in a hurry. She hesitated for a moment, feeling a chill run up her spine, but her curiosity was stronger. With a shaking hand, she opened the box completely. What she found made her catch her breath. Madison. It wasn't what I expected. Inside there were clothes, but they weren't old or torn clothes. There were children's clothes, small coats, shoes, and other items thrown carelessly as if they had been left there in a hurry. "Madison, what is this?" Madison whispered as she held one of the pieces in her hands, her voice shaking with disbelief. Henry approached, squinting his eyes, trying to process what he saw. Meanwhile, the cat remained motionless, its body rigid, its eyes fixed on something beyond them. It was a cold autumn morning, and the streets were practically deserted, enveloped by a light mist that rose from the sidewalks, still damp from the previous night's stillness. Everything was peaceful as usual, and the city seemed to be going about its usual routine where nothing out of the ordinary rarely happened. Henry and Madison, two experienced police officers, started another day of work. The local police station, situated in a central area close to the main square, was a place where few significant events took place. Small conflicts between neighbors, occasional arguments, and sometimes a traffic accident were the most activity that could be seen there. Life seemed to follow a slow and predictable rhythm, and they were both used to this apparent monotony. While Henry was having a coffee in front of the police station, he observed the street with a distracted look until something caught his attention. It was the cat. Not just any cat, but the same one that used to frequently appear there. His grey fur and deep expressive eyes were unmistakable. He wasn't exactly a domestic animal, nor did he seem to have an owner, but his constant presence in the police station area made him almost a familiar figure. The feline had a peculiar behavior. He appeared and disappeared as if he were a ghost, walking without making a sound, always on the sidelines of what was happening, as if he knew more than he let on. But that morning, something was different. Henry noticed that the cat was not simply wandering around as usual. Her movements had an intention, something that intrigued him deeply. "Henry, Madison, look at the cat again," he said, frowning, pointing in the direction of the slowly approaching animal. Madison, who was distracted fiddling with some papers inside the car, took a while to notice what Henry was trying to show. Madison. She must be looking for food, as always. To her, the cat's behavior was nothing more than usual, but Henry noticed that something was different. The feline wasn't just passing by as usual. He stopped halfway, faced the two police officers, and let out a loud, high-pitched meow. It wasn't just any sound. It was a meow full of urgency, which echoed through the alley near the police station, almost like a cry for help. Intrigued, Henry crouched down, extending his hand towards the cat, trying to understand what he wanted. But contrary to expectations, the animal did not approach. Instead, he jumped back, keeping his eyes fixed on Henry and Madison, and let out another meow, even more insistent. It was as if he was trying to make a connection, as if he desperately needed to say something. "Henry, that cat is not acting normally. See this? He's trying to show us something." His more serious tone caught Madison's attention, who finally looked away from the paper she was organizing. When he looked at the feline, he felt a pang of curiosity. The cat's eyes seemed fixed on theirs, intense and almost hypnotic. Madison hesitated for a moment, but something about the animal's behavior made her feel that there was something more going on there. The cat then took a few steps back, stopping in the middle of the street. He looked at the two again, as if he was calling them, as if he wanted to lead them somewhere. "Madison." "Maybe it's just a coincidence," Madison muttered, still trying to ignore the strangeness of the situation. However, an uneasy feeling began to rise within her, as if something bigger was about to reveal itself. Suddenly, the cat turned and began to walk hurriedly down the street, stopping from time to time to look back and check if the two police officers were following him. Henry didn't think twice. He got up quickly, and without waiting for Madison, said, "Henry, let's follow him." Madison looked at the papers that were on the car seat, wondering if she should really waste time on this. Henry's determined expression made it clear that he had already made his decision, and something inside Madison, perhaps a police instinct or something deeper, impelled her to follow him. "Madison, well, but if this is just a waste of time, you owe me a coffee," she said, trying to break the tension that was starting to hang in the air with a tone of lightness. The two began to follow the cat as it advanced through the deserted streets with intriguing confidence. The city seemed unusually silent that morning. Only the sound of Henry and Madison's footsteps and the feline's occasional meow broke the atmosphere. As they walked, the mood began to change in almost imperceptible but undeniably unsettling ways. The dark clouds that had previously been far away on the horizon now seemed to gather above them, filling the air with a feeling of heaviness and discomfort. The cat guided them with precision, entering narrow alleys and crossing almost invisible passages, places that would go unnoticed by most. The lights from the lamps on the street lights flickered, creating an effect that amplified the discomfort and the feeling that something was out of place. "Madison, that doesn't smell good to me," Madison muttered, looking around with a mix of apprehension and suspicion. Henry, however, seemed focused only on the animal, as if he knew it was leading to something important. As they advanced, they began to realize that they were leaving the busiest areas of the city behind. The scenery was now made up of isolated, aged streets where abandoned warehouses lined up in silence, forgotten places that no one would have reason to visit. The cat stopped in front of one of the oldest warehouses in the region. It was a building forgotten by time, with thick, rusty chains and a padlock that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. All around, the tall grass and broken windows reinforced the abandonment of the place. However, the cat didn't seem to mind this. He stood in front of the door, letting out an even louder and more distressing meow, as if he was begging for attention. "Madison, why did he bring us here?" Madison asked, feeling her heart race in her chest. Henry, with a serious face, took a step forward, approaching the door. Something was definitely wrong. The silence around was almost suffocating, as if the world had stopped. Even the wind, which previously seemed to blow steadily, was now still. The cat remained fixed, staring at the door, as if it wasn't going to leave until they did something. "Henry, I think we need to go in," he said, trying to hide the nervousness that was beginning to appear. Madison looked around, feeling the weight of the environment. It was as if the air around them was charged, as if something invisible was watching them. As he approached the door, he noticed something. The folders contained detailed reports of missing children. Photographs, dates, descriptions, everything was there. These children, they have been missing for the last few months. Madison, no one knew what had happened to them. "This is horrible," she muttered, her voice shaking with outrage and shock. Henry beside her held another folder tightly, his face serious as he tried to process the magnitude of what they were discovering. "Henry, this man is involved in something much bigger than we imagined." The room felt even more suffocating now, as if the weight of what they had discovered was pressing down on the air around them. Time was against them, and they both knew their next move would be crucial. The mystery was no longer just about the man or the cat. It was about something much darker, something they couldn't ignore. The sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse again. The man was returning. "Madison, we need to get out of here now," Madison whispered, quickly closing her folders and trying to remain calm. But before they could move, something unexpected happened. The cat reappeared, coming out of a dark corner of the room. His eyes were fixed on them, shining in the dim light, and he let out a soft meow. This time the sound didn't carry the urgency of a warning but seemed almost comforting, like a final gesture of guidance. Henry and Madison exchanged looks, understanding the animal's silent thanks. It was time to leave. With a renewed sense of urgency, the two prepared themselves and began to slowly leave the room, heading towards the nearest exit. The man hadn't noticed them yet, but they knew that every second was precious. Before walking through the door, Madison looked back one last time. The cat remained sitting motionless, watching them with an almost supernatural serenity. "Madison, thank you," she murmured, her voice breaking before turning and following Henry. When they finally reached the door and carefully opened it, the sound of scraping metal echoed through the warehouse, resounding like thunder in the silence. The man, immediately alerted, turned toward the noise, his gun raised. "Henry, run!" Henry pulled Madison by the hand. The two dashed out of the warehouse, plunging into the darkness of the night as the sound of gunfire boomed behind them. The man was shooting, trying to hit them as they ran through the shadows. Their hearts beat uncontrollably, adrenaline dominating every movement. Even so, there was something inside them, a feeling that no gunshot could erase. The worst was yet to come. Madison muttered, looking at the folders they had managed to grab. Her eyes were fixed on the papers, but her mind was buzzing with questions. "Henry, but where do we start?" Henry asked, holding the folder with missing persons cases. "Henry, these reports are just a start. Now we know that man is involved, but who else?" They both knew that returning to the warehouse at that moment would be suicidal. They were exposed, vulnerable, and without reinforcements. They would have been easily overpowered by someone who clearly knew what they were doing. However, something worried them. The cat. The animal had guided their every step that night as if he knew exactly where they should go. Henry didn't believe in coincidences, and the feline's behavior seemed to reinforce the idea that there were more pieces to this puzzle. Madison opened one of the folders, quickly leafing through until she stopped on a page. A photograph caught her attention, a girl with big eyes and an innocent smile. Below the image, her name, Isabella. The paper felt heavier in her hands as she processed what she was seeing. Madison, this girl, she disappeared 3 months ago, and nobody did anything. They didn't even listen to her parents. Her voice trailed off as a tightness in her chest made her imagine the suffering of that family who continued without answers, without justice. There was something much darker behind those disappearances. It wasn't just about the gunman or the warehouse. It was about an entire system that seemed to turn a blind eye to those lives. And somehow, the responsibility of discovering the truth had fallen to them. Henry, now more resolute, began to think of a plan. He knew they couldn't face this alone, but he also knew that conventional police probably wouldn't understand the gravity of what they were dealing with. "Henry, we need to be smart," he said, breaking the silence. His eyes were steady, reflecting the determination of someone who knew there was no going back. Madison looked at him and nodded. They both knew that the only way to move forward was to delve deeper into the darkness of that mystery. The idea that even police officers could be involved hung heavy in the air. The level of corruption was possibly much greater than they imagined. "Henry, let's go to the local newspaper." His voice carried a new clarity, his eyes determined. The journey to expose the truth was not just a mission, it was a battle against time and a race against unseen enemies. Every moment was filled with the weight of what was at stake and the fear of what could go wrong. But despite the dangers, the determination to reveal the truth kept them moving forward. In the quiet of the night, away from prying eyes, Madison and Henry faced a critical decision. Madison, they can help us spread the word safely without directly alerting those involved. Madison hesitated, considering the impact of her decision. Madison, exposing this information to the public could create chaos, but it was the only way to ensure that no one else disappeared. After a few moments, she nodded. Madison, you're right, Henry, but we need to be quick. He knows we have the proof, and now it won't just be him who is after us, but everyone else who is part of this. Without another word, they started walking towards the city. Every step seemed fraught with tension, as if danger lurked around every corner. The surrounding darkness seemed to hide new enemies, and fear began to mix with a growing determination. They weren't just fighting for their lives now, they were fighting for those children, for their families, and for all the people who had been destroyed by this dark plot. After a few hours of careful walking, they finally reached the city center. The streetlights cast long shadows over the almost deserted streets, creating an unsettling contrast. Every now and then, a car would slowly pass by, but the silence was strange for a Friday night. Henry. The newspaper is on the other side of the avenue. Henry pointed to a building with a simple facade and bright windows. They looked at each other, aware that the next step was crucial. Inside that building was the chance to bring the truth to light, but also the risk of drawing the attention of enemies who were everywhere. Without wasting time, they began to cross the avenue, each step marked by uncertainty and the weight of the responsibility they carried. As they crossed the avenue, an uncomfortable feeling enveloped them. Were they being observed? Maybe it was just nervousness, but the shadows around them seemed thicker than usual, and the looks they met along the way seemed filled with suspicion. They quickened their pace and entered the local newspaper building. They are greeted by a security guard who seems surprised by their unexpected arrival at that hour. Security guard, what are you doing here at this time, Henry? We need to talk to the editor. It's an emergency. The guard frowns, hesitating for a moment, but something in Henry's serious expression convinces him. He nods and lets them pass. Shortly afterwards, the two were sitting face to face with the newspaper editor, a middle-aged man with thinning hair and an expression that mixed curiosity and skepticism. Editor, what exactly do you guys have that can't wait until tomorrow? The editor begins to leaf through the folders that Madison had placed on the table. Madison, this can't wait. Children are disappearing, and we have concrete evidence that there is a network behind it. We found this evidence and we almost got killed trying to escape with it. The editor's eyes are fixed on the documents, analyzing them carefully. His expression slowly changes from skepticism to seriousness and clear concern. Editor, this is very serious. If what you're saying is true, it will take over all the news, but it could also put our lives at risk." Henry and Madison exchanged looks, aware of the danger they faced. "Henry, we know, but we need to do what's right." The editor takes a deep breath, visibly thoughtful. "Editor, I'll help you, but we need to be extremely careful. I'm going to contact some trusted people and start investigating this discreetly. If we're dealing with a network, we can't act impulsively, otherwise they'll destroy all the evidence." Madison looks out the window. Outside on the dark sidewalk is the cat. Its eyes shine in the moonlight, fixed as if watching every movement. "Madison, we're on the right track. Henry, I feel that way too." They both knew that the next few hours would be crucial. The enemy was closer than they could imagine, and somehow the cat seemed to be more involved than they could understand. The silence of the night seemed even thicker when Madison and Henry left the newspaper office. Each step was accompanied by a growing sense of vigilance. They knew they had put their lives on the line by seeking the editor's help, but they also knew there was no turning back. Time was against them, and the disappearance ring seemed to be getting closer and closer, not only to being unmasked, but also to finding them. The cat is still there, sitting on the sidewalk, its bright eyes fixed on Henry and Madison's every move. Henry crouches down and gently passes his hand over the animal's head. Henry. For the first time that night, he felt true gratitude for the little feline. The cat's presence seemed to be more than a coincidence. It was as if something greater, something inexplicable, was guiding them, urging them to continue. "Madison, we need to get back to the warehouse. There are still more answers there, and something tells me that what we found was just the tip of the iceberg." Henry looks at her, hesitant. "Henry, okay, but we need to be even more careful this time. We can't afford to get caught again." With that, the two start their way back to the abandoned warehouse. The night air is thick, heavy, and each step seems to bring with it a new sense of imminent danger. The cat follows them, its silent paws gliding over the earth as if it were a protective ghost. When they finally arrived at the warehouse, everything was plunged into darkness. The silence was overwhelming, and there was no sign of the man who had chased them earlier, but that didn't mean he wasn't nearby, hiding, waiting. With extreme caution, they approached the rusty doors. The sound of metal, although low, seems deafening in the absolute silence. With a controlled movement, Henry pushes the doors open, creating space for them to enter. Every step inside the warehouse felt like a calculated risk, a move that could change everything. As they advanced, the feeling of being watched followed them like an invisible shadow. What awaited them inside was something that not even the cat, their silent guide, could predict. The inside of the warehouse looks different. The air is colder, almost sharp, and shadows dance restlessly on the concrete walls, as if the place held secrets that didn't want to be revealed. Madison glances at Henry, who is holding the flashlight tightly, illuminating the path ahead. "Madison, we need to find more evidence," she whispers as her eyes adjust to the growing darkness. The environment carries an almost palpable tension, which makes each step seem heavier as they carefully walk. Through the space, a distant sound interrupted the silence. At first it was almost imperceptible, but it soon became clear they were voices, faint but unmistakable. Someone was in the warehouse. The two immediately stopped, their bodies frozen by the instinct of alert. Henry asked, lowering the flashlight slightly and examining the surrounding environment. "Madison, yes, we are not alone," Madison replied, swallowing hard. Beside them, the cat, which had been following them closely, also stopped, its ears pointed in the direction of the sound, attentive to something that only it seemed to notice. Suddenly, the feline darted towards one of the side doors, moving with a determination that made Madison's eyes widen. "Madison, the cat went there," she said, surprised. "Henry, I think we should follow him. It seems like he knows more than us," replied Henry with a touch of nervous humor in his voice. Without hesitation, the two moved silently, following the cat to the side door. When they opened the door, they found a small, dimly lit room. A dim light streamed in through a broken window, creating a faint glow that revealed what was inside. As soon as they entered, they were frozen in front of the scene they witnessed. 3 men were gathered around a table, papers, photographs, and documents scattered about it as if they were part of a secret investigation. Among the papers, Madison immediately recognized an image that made her catch her breath: the photo of Isabella, the missing girl. Madison's heart quickened as the gravity of the scene became clear. Those men were not there by chance. Henry. "My God," he murmured, his heart racing. As they watched the scene, the men around the table spoke in low voices, but it was clear that the conversation revolved around the mysterious disappearances. The tension in the room was almost tangible. Among them, Henry and Madison recognized the man who had attacked them before. He seemed agitated, more nervous than ever. "Man 1, some of our documents were taken," said one of the men, his voice thick with frustration. He hit the table hard, making the papers jump. "Man 2, we need to find these intruders before they do anything." Henry and Madison exchanged an urgent look. They knew they needed to get out of there immediately, but before they could move, something completely unexpected happened. The cat, which until then had guided them silently, advanced to the center of the room. Its paws made no noise, but its presence attracted the men's attention instantly. "Man 3, what is that?" asked one of them, frowning as he looked at the feline. The cat stared at them with the same bright eyes as before, as if trying to communicate something, its imperturbable posture defying the imminent danger. "Henry, now let's go," Henry whispered, holding Madison's hand and pulling her out of the room. They left as quickly as they could, their hearts beating frantically as they ran through the warehouse towards the exit. The sound of the men's voices still echoed behind them, but the pair knew time was running out. Madison said, breathless as she looked at Henry. "Yes, but we have to act quickly. They will stop at nothing," he replied, equally breathless. The weight of what they had discovered pushed them forward, each step charged with adrenaline and determination. They knew that the fight was far from over, but also that they had come closer to the heart of the mystery and the danger. "They will destroy all the evidence if they know we are after them," replied Henry as he took out his cell phone and called the police station. His eyes were alert even as he spoke, as if he expected something to happen at any moment. In the midst of that confusion and adrenaline, something familiar caught Madison's attention. The cat. There he was again, beside them, his eyes shining in the darkness as if he knew he had gotten them out of that place in time. It was almost as if he felt relief too. "This cat is amazing," said Madison, smiling with relief for the first time that night. After tense hours of waiting, the police finally arrived at the scene. Guided by information from Henry and Madison, in a meticulous operation, those responsible for the disappearances were captured, and all evidence in the warehouse was confiscated. The case was finally being solved, bringing hope to families who had suffered so much. However, something continued to intrigue them: the mystery of the cat. How did he know exactly where to take them? How had he managed to guide them to the truth when no one else seemed able to see what was happening? As Madison petted the cat for the last time before leaving, she felt a mix of gratitude and fascination. "Thank you, friend," she whispered, her voice soft and full of emotion. The cat looked at her for a moment before turning and walking down the street, his silhouette disappearing into the night as silent as he had arrived. News of the dismantling of the disappearance ring quickly spread. Local newspapers and television channels covered the story, praising the courage of Henry and Madison, who risked their lives to reveal the truth. The families finally had answers, and justice was beginning to be served. But for Madison, the real hero of that night was the cat. Without him, they might never have found the path or the answers they were looking for. That night, as the city celebrated the end of one of the darkest chapters in its history, Madison knew she would never forget the little feline who, in such an inexplicable way, guided them to the light in the midst of the darkness. She never knew where he came from or where he went, but the cat's presence remained in her memory as a symbol of courage and intuition. A few weeks later, Madison and Henry decided to adopt a cat. They went to the local shelter, and among so many felines, one in particular caught Madison's attention. His eyes shone with the same intensity as those of the mysterious cat that had guided them that night. "I think we found our friend," said Madison, smiling as she petted the new addition to the family. Life took its course, but in the back of their minds, the memory of that extraordinary cat never faded. He was the silent hero who, with steady and mysterious steps, guided two police officers directly to the truth. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more exciting stories like this. Click the subscribe button and activate the bell so you don't miss any news. And of course, leave a like if this journey full of mystery and emotion made you reflect or connect with the characters.